Clannad made me cry. And I'm not the only one. Despite being a 16-year-old anime, every year hundreds of thousands of people watch it and talk about how much it moved them. More importantly, they talk about how much it changed their lives and their perspective on everything. But how did a simple romance achieve this? What sets it apart? However, before we get into that, for those who haven't heard of Clannad or are unsure if it's their kind of anime, before I dive into any spoilers, let's discuss what the heck it is all about. Usually, the best way to go into an anime is with no prior knowledge, and that's what I would recommend since that's the best way to experience it. But I get that some people just want more than just knowing it's good, so I will try my best to give you a spoiler-free rundown of it. So first of all, what is Clannad about? It's about Tomoya, a high school student who doesn't really enjoy his life. Each day feels like a burden, doing stuff that he don't really care about, going home to a place he despises. All he wants is a change in his life, which becomes reality after meeting a strange girl uttering an unusual word. As weird as it sounds, these are the words that change everything for him, leading him to talk to Nagisa, a cute girl who evidently mutters names of foods she likes to give her the confidence to get through the day. She was held back a year due to a severe illness, and she really wants to re-establish the school's drama club. Although the start is dramatic, the sadness isn't the main part of the story. Clannad weaves a heartwarming tale where our protagonist makes many friends along the way, and with them new situations will appear, turning his lonely days into something much more enjoyable, happy, mysterious, but most of the time to something downright chaotic. Despite that, what you typically hear about Clannad is that it will make you cry. However, it's not that you have to feel sad, but rather that in certain scenes, it becomes so relatable that you can't help but cry. The anime is filled with a bunch of characters that are really easy to describe. At first, they might seem basic or boring, but this actually makes them more interesting because there's a lot of room for them to change and grow. In the first episode, we get introduced to most of these. For instance, among Tomoya's friends is Tsunohara, who always seems to get beaten up. Then there are the Fujibayashi twins where Ryo is a shy girl that hides her feelings, and if you say anything bad to her, her sister Kyo will beat you up. There's also Tomoyo, a violent girl who has a bunch of cool action scenes. Not to forget Nagisa's parents and a bunch of other. Yeah, there is a lot of beating for some reason. The anime abounds with simple characters that act like a bunch of weirdos, and that's why I love them so much. Essentially, the anime follows their everyday lives and introduces us to their individual problems that Tomoya wants to help them with. It is really emotional, but the reason why people love it is because it changes the way they think about their family and friends. It makes people more aware of their surroundings and what's important to them. This isn't something you often experience in other anime. A lot of people tend to skip the first season, but I recommend you watching both because it's the entire set that makes Clannad the masterpiece it is. Now back to the actual review. Since the characters are presented in such a straightforward way, there's plenty of room for them to develop, which really influences how the story unfolds, and that is why the most important part of the story are the characters and their arcs. Although Tomoya is the main character, the first season doesn't necessarily revolve around him, but as I said, rather about his interactions with other girls and how he develops them overcome their respective obstacles. Which is why the anime is divided into arcs, focusing on a specific character's story, but the overall immersive feel of the story is not lost. One aspect that Clannad excels at is that beneath these arcs, there's always something else building up. It especially does a great job in the first arc with the story of Fuko. She's a hyperactive and childish girl whom Tomoya met in an empty classroom, busy carving a block of food with a knife. Initially, she came across as a really annoying character to me, one that didn't seem to serve any purpose in the development of the story, but was simply there as a filler. However, the more and more time Tomoya spent with her, the more her character started to make sense. She doesn't go home, nor does she attend classes. All she does is carve wooden starfish that she wants to distribute to all the students in the school with the intention of having them attend her sister's wedding. It's quite strange at first, but we quickly learn from Fuko's sister that Fuko is in a coma following a car accident, and the Fuko present before them is not real. Her sister, for instance, can't see Fuko at all. After this, Tomoya and Nagisa take it upon themselves to take care of Fuko, treating her as if she were their own child. This story is likely one of my favorite, but it often gets overshadowed because the most popular and memorable parts are at the end of the anime. Fuko is a really fun yet annoying character that introduces a lot of chaos into the anime without making it feel too overwhelming simply because of how short her story is. After figuring out her goal, they bring Fuko to stay at Nagisa's house, and Nagisa's family joins in, helping to carve more starfish. It's heartwarming, but the episode after always hits me really hard. In the hospital, the real Fuko had stopped breathing, which caused her to fade away. People started forgetting her along with the starfish she gave them. I don't know how you felt about it, really enough a lot of people felt annoyed watching this arc, but for me, that scene where Nagisa's mom remembers her name but can't see her at all, breaking down while knowing that she's still there deep down, made me feel incredibly emotional. Her story concludes with her wish finally coming true, with a marriage finally happening. Afterward, she disappears, satisfied that she fulfilled her duty. It's a really long arc, causing many viewers to drop the anime. However, for those who stay, it's really rewarding and it becomes clear why it's so long. Her story is quite melancholic when you think about it. She stood there, giving everyone the star, every single day, hoping that someone would understand her. Deep down, she knew that regardless of her efforts, she wouldn't be remembered. After Fuko's story, we are introduced to Kotomi, the girl genius, whom Tomoya meets in a similar manner to how he encountered Fuko. But instead of carving wood, Kotomi was cutting up a book. Although unlike for Fuko, we didn't know why. Kotomi often just zones out, not realizing what she's doing. She's always reading and often skips classes, yet she's considered a genius, always ranking at the top of the school. Their interactions were always really weird, reaching a point where it actually felt annoying. However, as someone that dealt with similar issues, I found her relatable. It's not that she doesn't want to talk with others, but rather that she always had a hard time expressing herself, and the more Tomoya spent time with her, the more she started to open up. I especially loved when their conversation ended with "see you again." It's such a small thing, but it showed that she was feeling more and more comfortable around him. However, her story truly begins in episode 10 when we first see her outside of the library. Tomoya was able to convince her to join the drama club, though her attempts at making friends went quite weirdly.
Nagisa-chan,
She's really bad at communicating, but what I appreciate is that the anime doesn't rush through that aspect. Sometimes it can be a bit annoying to watch, but I love that everyone takes the time to talk to her on her level, making her feel more at ease. It feels like watching a bunch of idiots talk to each other, but it actually makes a lot of sense. She finally felt more comfortable around people, although that led to one of the most painful scenes in the history of anime. This is the point where I thought her story would end. It seemed like it was all about her stepping out of her comfort zone, and I loved the process of that. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case. First, there was a strange man following her that she seemed to be very scared of, but luckily the others were there to defend her. However, it truly became apparent that something wasn't right when she completely broke down in tears after witnessing a bus crash. Watching this scene again, I could only describe it as scary because of how well it was executed visually and in terms of voice acting. It just wasn't expected, especially after they had made it seem like her story had already concluded. After that accident, she just disappeared from school. Tomoya ends up going to Kotomi's house, hoping to talk with her. As he enters, he suddenly realizes he's been there before. They were friends as kids. When he steps into the room, he finds the walls covered with newspaper clippings about Kotomi's parents and reports of their death. Suddenly, her attempts to cut up all those books make a lot more sense. She was trying to cope with the loss of her parents by trying to be like them, by trying to step into their shoes and complete what they worked on. Her story is probably the most relatable one. Most of us experience losing people that are close to us really early on in our life. Her story perfectly depicts how people act when they struggle to move on. After countless of weird interactions with her, he finally understood why she was always so closed up, yet it felt more painful knowing. One thing that both seasons of Clannad does really well is the explanation of its characters while telling a story that we can relate to, something that can happen to us. It's basically a cheat code that makes the climax of a scene feel a lot more emotional. Kotomi's story concludes with her returning to school after Tomoya helps clean up her garden. She finally has a conversation with a strange man and discovers that he is her legal guardian, and all he wants is to give her the suitcase of her parents. Inside, it has a teddy bear and a final message. Once again, a scene that will make you cry, but I love the conclusion of it. I love that she's able to find closure with her parents' passing. While both of these stories were unfolding, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of other things were happening in the meantime. Mainly the stories of the two main characters, which the anime puts a lot more focus on after the conclusion of Kotomi's story. Unlike other characters, Nagisa's story is a lot more intricate. Despite her introverted nature, she's a really cheerful and bubbly person. Unfortunately, there are several times in the anime where she disappears due to her unknown illness. Towards the end of the first season, we learn more about it from her dad. When Nagisa was a child, both her parents were really occupied with their own career, leaving little time for her. One day, she fell really ill, and her parents couldn't find anyone to stay with her, and they had to leave for work. Even though her dad tried to come home quickly, he found Nagisa collapsed outside, waiting for their return. Due to Nagisa nearly dying, both of her parents abandoned their jobs and their dreams in order to protect Nagisa. I really liked her throughout the whole anime. She's such a unique and sweet character that always made me smile. The story begins with her aspiration to revive the drama club, and the first season essentially concludes with her performance. I really liked that aspect of it, how this drama club connected all the characters together. It started with them helping others, and now they are all there to support Nagisa and her dream. Unfortunately, things don't unfold as smoothly as they hoped. Nagisa found out how her parents gave up on their dream for her. During her performance, she tries to do her best, but she just can't stop thinking about her parents, and she just completely breaks down. After that, I love this scene we have, it's probably my favorite. His father appears and screams his lungs out about how they changed their dreams to her dream. How they are a family and this is their most important moment. This is their dream. It's such a serious scene that completely contrasts the character we know her father to be. He was always presented as a really goofy, childish person, yet he was able to be serious when it really mattered. Her parents are some of the most well-written characters I've ever seen. I love them so much. She was able to continue and the play was a huge success. Now the only story left to wrap up is Tomoya's relationship with his father. Tomoya is the main protagonist we follow through the entire anime. He's a really well-written character who genuinely cares about his friends and loves helping them overcome their problems, even though he struggles with his own. Throughout the first season, his character is the one that develops the most simply because of how much conflict he has in his life. We always see him as a very cheerful person when he's with his friends, but that is not the case at home. He doesn't have a good relationship with his father. His mother died in a car accident when he was young, and because of that, his father became an alcoholic. They would argue constantly, and during one of those fights, he was brutally slammed into a wall. This incident dislocated his shoulder, which led him to quit basketball shortly afterwards. From the first episode, we see how distant they are, and this is the only quote-unquote problem that won't be solved in the first season at all. However, what happens is that Tomoya learns about family and friends who gradually change his cynical and negative outlook on life. Throughout the entire anime, he's the one who mostly needs help, and I love how the show depicts how much his friends genuinely care about him. There's always someone there, no matter how small his problem may be. For instance, Nagisa's parents accept him without a second thought. They even let him live with them and work at their bakery. Tsunohara also always welcomed him into his place, even though he almost got beaten up quite a few times because of that. He can rely and trust all his friends and even thinks of them as family. I love how the anime goes in a circle. It's not just him helping everyone else while he's left suffering with his own issues. They are always together in it. He was never alone, and it overall teaches us an important lesson: to always cherish the people we love. The first season ends with Tomoya confessing his feelings to Nagisa and them ending up together. It's quite a complicated season overall with a lot of storylines, yet significantly different from the second season. So why is it so important? Many people often skip the first season of Clannad because it lacks the emotional depth that After Story provides. As a result, a lot of people feel unsatisfied by the end and struggle to understand why others hold Clannad in such high regard. However, the first season is crucial for fully appreciating the second season. It primarily focuses on character development, which is necessary for us to connect more deeply with the characters later on. To truly understand why Tomoya behaves a certain way later on, we have to understand the relationship with his father. Without the first season, Clannad After Story wouldn't carry the same impact. Following a character over 50 episodes compared to just half of that makes a massive difference. It makes it significantly easier for us to comprehend their struggles and relate to them. One aspect of Clannad that I believe is super underrated is its humor. People always talk about how sad Clannad is, and that is an excellent part of that, but they tend to overlook just how funny it can be. Much of the enjoyment in the first season comes from its humor. The characters overall are just written in a way to be kinda stupid, which makes certain scenes really funny, but also a lot more enjoyable. Most of the jokes are quite repetitive, yet the characters make it enjoyable and funny to watch. Scenes like Tsunohara repeatedly getting beaten up, or Akio unintentionally making negative comments about Sana's bread, causing her to run off with tears in her eyes. And Akio stuffing his mouth with her bread and saying he loves it while running after her always makes me laugh. These things happen so many times, yet it wasn't annoying. It didn't feel poorly written. It's actually the opposite. I loved seeing it, because there was always something unique in it that made it funnier and more enjoyable. When I first watched Clannad, I expected the whole thing to be sad, but I genuinely enjoyed it at the end because of its humor. Another part I think that it does really well is its portrayal of romance. At the end of the day, Clannad is considered a harem, but I'm so happy that romance wasn't the main focus of it. The characters never seem to prioritize it specifically, and their development alongside Tomoya felt incredibly natural. What I found particularly unique is that even though we know Nagisa will end up with with Tomoya, the other potential romantic options also feel just as authentic. Regardless of whom he might have ended up with, I think most of us would have been happy. I mean, it's obvious how popular all the girls are, considering there are official spin-offs in which Tomoya ends up with different girls. It's also just really cool that it portrays a complete relationship and not just a part where the characters get together. I hate when it takes an entire season for two characters to become a couple and we can't even see them actually being together. In Clannad, we get to see the whole process, from meeting each other to getting together to continuing that into After Story. But now, why do people consider After Story so much better than the first season? What does it do differently? What makes After Story special? After Story actually continues in a similar manner as the first season, delving into different character stories. However, that only goes on for 9 episodes where we get a few more stories, and my favorite is about Tsunohara, where Nagisa's mom gets to pose as his fake girlfriend, so his sister will stop worrying about him. After this, episode 9 becomes one of the last episodes where we witness all the characters together as they graduate from high school. The anime style undergoes a complete transformation, shifting its focus entirely to the lives of the two main characters and how their relationship evolves. It particularly focuses on Tomoya's life and the decisions he makes. When Nagisa decides to repeat her senior year due to her illness, Tomoya continues working at the bakery. However, he soon takes a step to become more independent. He eventually moves out of Nagisa's home and into a small apartment of his own, taking up a job as an electrician. After this, the anime picks up in pace by quite a lot. There are a lot of time skips, but it makes the overall story better because it only focuses on the really important moments. For example, it portrays how Tomoya starts prioritizing his work over his relationship with Nagisa. He desires success and seeks to prove his worth for his company, but unconsciously ends up neglecting his relationship in the process. This unconscious behavior is something that we all do at times, where we focus solely on one aspect of our lives, while inadvertently disregarding everything else. What makes it more painful is that after all this time invested into the company, he gets offered a new position as a manager in a new electrician firm, which falls through when his father gets arrested. Afterward, the story takes a happier turn as Tomoya finally proposes to Nagisa. Yet my favorite part of the proposal is how he attempts to discuss it with Akio, who agrees only if Tomoya can score a decent hit in a baseball match. It creates a really fun episode and gives us a break from everything else that is happening in his life, kind of going back to the vibes of season 1. I loved seeing how much it right, and that moment when he finally succeeded felt so good. After that, he begged Akio to let Nagisa be with him, and I just loved the response of Sanae.
そして今日からは智也さんも私たちの夢です。二人の幸せが私たちの夢なんです。
In the same episode, they got married. Afterward, they begin living together, and Nagisa starts working at a family restaurant. Once again, we are treated to a hilarious episode involving Aki as they visit Nagisa at work. Just listen to him.
Yo,俺 MC アキオ。
そちらの方はお友達ですか？
ってわかんねえのかよ。
初対面の方ですから。
この親にしてこの子ありだな。
After that, they found out that Nagisa is pregnant, which is probably my favorite moment because of how they react. Unfortunately, this is the turning point where the anime takes a drastic shift and transforms into a rather depressing mess. As Nagisa entered the final moments of her pregnancy, she fell ill once more and had to give birth at home. While she successfully brought her daughter, Ushio, into the world, she passed away moments after. I must admit, this moment completely crushed me the first time I watched it. I cried like I never had for any anime before. I still vividly remember going to bed in tears, waking up next day, and as soon as I started the next episode, I found myself crying again, not stopping until I had finished the entire season. I'm not sure why, but it evoked such intense emotions in me, and I'm not the only one feeling this way. It's really depressing seeing a kind of relationship you would want just end this way. The story after this has a 5-year skip, where Tomoya gave up raising Ushio and left her in the care of Akio and Sanae. He became an alcoholic, not caring about anything. Ironically, the thing that he hated his father for. It's insane how effectively they can change how you feel about the main character in just one episode. He became a character that you truly felt hatred for. However, I really liked how the anime deals with it and essentially resolves it. 5 years later, Sanae asks him to go with her, Akio and Ushio on a family trip. After Tomoya agrees, Sanae and Akio doesn't show up, in hope that Tomoya realizes what he's doing and what he misses out on, that he has a daughter that he should care about. She should be more important to him than anything else. Ushio is just so damn cute, and it's really painful to consider the situation from her perspective. She hasn't done anything wrong, yet she was left alone. What's different though, is that she doesn't behave like Tomoya did as a child. Initially, she is scared of Tomoya, but she doesn't hate him. They really nailed how a child would act. She is scared, but curious at the same time. While Tomoya starts off resentful towards her, slowly but surely, he begins to warm up to her and even asks if she wants to go on a trip with just him. I really love this upcoming episode where Sana arranges this trip. It's meant for Tomoya to meet his grandmother and learns about his father's past, including the sacrifices he made for Tomoya. Through this, Tomoya comes to realize that his father wasn't a bad person. Sure, he had his problems, but he genuinely cared about Tomoya and wanted to raise him no matter what. Tomoya finally realizes what he needs to do and asks Yoshio if she wants to live with him. She's overjoyed at the prospect of being with her father. After that, he opens up and talks about her mommy for a bit. Just watching it while writing this script makes me cry. It's not fair. Slowly but surely, everything seems to fall into place. They start living together, he gets the chance to talk with his father, he reconnects with Kyo, who is now Ushio's teacher. Everything seems to be going way too smoothly, and we all know that's never a good sign. Unfortunately, Ushio suffers from the same illness as her mom did, and her condition never really improves. In fact, it gets much worse. Tomoya, feeling desperate, wants to fulfill her wish and takes her on a trip. However, after they leave the house, Ushio collapses in his arm, just after telling her father that she loves him. Canonically, this marks the end of Clannad. It's a story filled with constant suffering, where everything seems to get worse and worse. It's undeniably depressing, yet highly enjoyable. The reason why we love it is because it's incredibly relatable. While certain stories involve supernatural elements like Fuko's story, everything else that happens in the anime could happen to any of us. Speaking of supernatural elements, while I would consider episode 21 as the end of Clannad, there is one more episode that finishes the story which I haven't discussed yet. This is a place that we see through the entire anime without much explanation. We witnessed it in every single episode but never truly understood its significance. It's a world inhabited by a girl who creates a body out of garbage so she will not be alone in her world. It is described as being a world where nothing can be born. Later, we discover that Ushio created this world after her death, regretting leaving her father alone. She becomes the girl in this world with the hope of reuniting with her father and collecting enough light orbs to make a miracle possible. One day, the robot convinces her to leave this place, but she's unable to move in the snow. She regains her memories and refers to the garbage doll as Papa, who is indeed Tomoya. Subsequently, the illusionary world collapses and the timeline reverts to a point where Tomoya doesn't interact with Nagisa. However, in the end, he decides to talk with her, leading to a future where she doesn't die and they raise Yoshio together. It's a somewhat confusing ending, yet I can't say that it doesn't make sense. It's a storyline that existed since the first episode, and deep down it feels like the ending we all wanted. Production-wise, this anime was perfect. The style of it definitely resembles an older anime, but it aged really well overall. It's incredibly colorful, and the backgrounds perfectly capture the essence of a countryside setting. Everything is fully detailed, whether it's clothing, furniture, or decorations. Everything is animated. There isn't a moment where the characters remain static, and it's done in a really realistic way. The characters never feel stagnant. It feels like they are real and living characters. The music is also on another world. I love listening to it. It has a really unique and recognizable tone, yet so many unique variations. I just love Clannad. It's one of my favorite anime of all time. It was just so different from everything else. It made me laugh, it made me cry, it made me care about the people close to me. It's truly a story that changes the way we view our life. It's so sad, but I'm happy that I watched it. It has countless amount of amazing characters and storylines that are all really interesting on their own. Characters like Nagisa's parents were so unique and fun. I love the way the story changed around Tomoya's death. I don't think I will ever watch anything that has the same impact. And yeah, this is the end of the review. I just wanted to have some afterwards if you want to listen to it. This was a project that I wanted to do since I created this channel, and I'm so happy that I was finally able to do it, and I'm really proud of the end result. It took me way longer than I expected. It's definitely the longest project I have ever worked on, but I loved every second of it. I hate to admit it, but I cried way too many times while writing this script. Anyway, if you are still here, I hope you enjoyed watching, and I'm really thankful for that. Goodbye.